Welcome. I'm Rielly Karsh.
I'm Tovah Copan.
We are thrilled to bring you the We Go Boldly podcast.
Let's talk big burning questions, life changes, and maybe a bit of personal business.
Let's be bold and brave together. Are you ready?
I am. Here comes the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to We Go Boldly, the podcast. We are so excited to have you with us, as we always are, and welcome to our YouTube subscribers. We are relatively new to this platform, so we want to make sure we welcome anyone who's watching us there. We're thrilled to have you on as well, and we're still getting used to being on video, so bear with us as we get adjusted to that process. But also, of course, welcome to all of our regular listeners. We love having you all with us, and we are, thrilled to be embarking on this season 6, talking about busyness and self-worth and really important topics, especially coming out of or coming through, I don't even know what the right words are yet, the COVID pandemic and everything we've been going through for the past few years. So this is episode 3 of our season. And before we dive in, I am going to do what I always do, of course, and welcome my amazing, fantastical, wonderful co-host, Tovah, to the show. So how are you today, Tovah? What's shaking?
I am good. We're recording this on a Friday and it feels like a Friday. I'm sort of excited that it's Friday.
Yeah.
And I'm ready. This is something that we talk about a lot. And I think we realized that we were talking about a lot in just our lives and that it needed to be talked about on the podcast. So here we are.
Yeah. So today, for everyone listening, we are going to talk about hustle culture, the busyness of work, and we're going to kind of, to use corporate speak, drill down through that into what we mean about how we're using the busyness of work to kind of bury ourselves and to lose ourselves, and whether we're doing it consciously or not, that's ultimately what's happening, and then sort of loop all that back to our self-worth and where we derive our self-worth from, and how we can sort of get back to a place of feeling worthy without having to rely on the pats on the head that we get from doing work, right? So as we always do, we're going to start at the beginning. Well, maybe we don't always start at the beginning, but we're going to start with some definitions.
Yeah.
We do. We try to get there at some point. We're going to start with some definitions. We're going to talk about what hustle culture means, because it's really been something that has, it's existed for a long time, I think, but it's been talked about a lot in the last few years, certainly since like 2019. I think it's been very mainstream discussed. There's been a lot of articles and blog posts and scientific studies and all those sorts of things about hustle culture and kind of the hustle culture and millennial connection. And I'm interested to have this conversation and dive into it. So let's start with thinking about what we mean when we're talking about hustle culture. I personally mean toxic productivity and burnout. But a lot of people think of hustle culture as that like rise and grind theory, right? That you wake up every morning and you leap out of bed and you're immediately productive and you're immediately running to do something and to like constantly be producing, and that you're constantly on, and it's, every moment of every day is about work. And whatever that work might be, it might be multiple types of work. It might be your 9-to-5 job, plus like the 3 side hustles you have, plus 6 more jobs, whatever it is, it's constant hustling. And so that's what we're talking about today and kind of getting into.
And I want to add that we're talking about work as like, these are things that you don't necessarily have to get paid for as well, right? So if you don't have a job that you get paid for, but you are involved on, you sit on boards and you're involved in a lot of volunteer pursuits, whether it's at your school's PTA or whatever it is. We're talking about that too. Like we're talking about working, right? Whether it is for the benefit of getting paid or for some other benefit. It can have the same effect on you, and it can be done for the same reasons. You could be doing it for the same reasons that other people are.
Right. I do think also it's important to note what we are not talking about. And we are not talking about working for survival, right? We're not talking about folks who have 6 jobs because they have to, and that's how they pay the bills and eat, right? That's a very different kind of quote hustle. So I want to be super clear about that. There are people in this country that are working 24 hours a day because that's the only way that they can pay for the things that they need to survive. And that is a significantly different kind of scenario, and one that requires a whole different podcast episode that perhaps we'll do, and talk about the injustice of. But that's not this kind of hustle culture that we're talking about today.
And to note that the studies have shown that people who are truly working that amount and truly hustling for survival or to get ahead, but not in the way that we're going to be talking about it, but like to actually like give their family that opportunity that they've been working so hard for. They don't buy into the hustle culture. They would be very happy to work 5 jobs instead of 6.
Right.
They would be fine with that.
Yeah.
If they were paid a fair wage, perhaps they could, right?
So, yes.
That is not what we're talking about, but it does go to this sort of belief that Americans especially have, that if you want to succeed or achieve anything in your life, if you just work hard enough, you'll be able to do it. It's like this golden goose that's always like just out of our reach. If we just work a little harder, we watch a little less TV, we get up a little earlier, we sleep a little less, we'll be able to get there. And clearly, if you are dealing with your family's survival, or even just not just survival, but hopefully to be able to take a breath financially, you're not striving for the golden goose. You're striving for being able to take a breath. So
yeah,
that is, that's what we're talking about. And, hustle culture is just a fun way to say like a workaholic.
Yeah, it is. It's like it's a softer, gentler way to say you're addicted to working, and that addiction is feeding something inside you that is lacking, right? That some need inside you that is also not being filled by something. There's a lot of somethings in that sentence, but so what now that we've sort of laid out that groundwork for the discussion, and made it clear who, like the parameters of who and what we're talking about. It's we want to make sure that we're being clear, because it's important to us that we know that we're fully aware that there are some differences among what people have to do versus what people are doing to themselves. And that's that there is a real distinction there, and it does have a difference.
And I would say one more thing. This is a long definition, but we're also, and this is where I think most of our conversation is going to happen. Both of us, I have another full-time job. And I also have a podcast, as you're aware, because you're listening to it. And we do coaching, and we have a business. And so we are not also attacking or degrading people for working hard.
No.
Because we think that's awesome. And we love it. And we love people going after their dreams and doing hard work. But I have bought into the hustle culture and had a side hustle And I have had this, if we want to call this a side hustle, I like to think of this as like an equal hustle, but like, and I have done it while not buying into hustle culture. And it is two drastically different experiences. And I have done it while I am hiding from my life and while I am ignoring big things in my life. And I've done it where it is in alignment with my goals and I'm not ignoring big problems. And it is a different experience. And so I want to clarify that as well, because we are not telling people to drop their side hustles. We're not telling people to not go for what they want or not volunteer or not work hard. We love all of that. It's great, but we need to know why we're doing it and what are the things that we're ignoring, either that we are aware of doing, like ignoring it on purpose. Like, I don't like to go. I mean, I had a conversation with someone recently. I don't like to go be at home, so I work a lot. Now that's being very aware of what they're doing in their life. I was not that person. I did not realize I was ignoring things. Shocker. That I did not realize that, I was ignoring things, but I was ignoring a lot of things. And I was super happy to brag about how I'm running on no sleep and I was able to stay up super late and all of these things. And I just didn't know I was doing it, which is kind of why we're here talking about this.
Right. So a little bit more about kind of hustle culture definition. I mean, you touched on some of this just now, Tova, but according to a lot of the research we did and a lot of the articles we've read, essentially what it boils down to is this idea of working long hours, bragging about not sleeping enough and bragging about working a lot, claiming to be exhausted, but forcing yourself to work through it. This idea that you're like, I've had to have 7 cups of coffee today just to stay awake so I can keep working. And believing, and I think this is for me, one of the most important reminders and something I really struggled with for a long time, but believing that resting is a waste of time and that rest equals, failure in some way. Right. Which obviously here at We Go Boldly, we do not agree with. But it is something that I struggled with personally for, I don't know, most of my life, this idea that you could actually rest and that would still lead to productivity at some point, or that it was worthwhile just in and of itself, that it's like a good thing to allow yourself downtime. And one more important thing that I read that I found like really sort of hit it home for me was it's a fear of missing out, but for work, right? Like you're at work and you're staying there because maybe something will happen. And if you're not there, you'll miss it. Or if you don't put in the hours, somebody else will get the hours. Or if you don't say yes to the project, somebody else will say yes to the project. And so, you'll get left out. Those kinds of thoughts, if that's like the constant thought. And now, let's be very clear. There is also a work culture in this country and in many other countries, but certainly in this country that feeds that fear, that feeds that belief system. Not at every company, but certainly at a lot of companies. And so it's not an unfounded fear, unfortunately, right. But it is something that I think a lot of people who are in this mode struggle with. And that is that, if I'm not there, if I'm not saying yes to everything, if I'm not always available, if I don't answer my emails at 11:30 at night, if I don't pick up the phone on Sunday afternoon, then I'm missing out and I will be looked upon as not as good as, the other person in the other cubicle. And that is that sort of fear of missing out, but related to work versus, fun things. So that's where we're coming from when we're talking about this hustle culture, this mentality, workaholism that we sort of started out with.
Yeah. And I know we should probably take a quick break, but I think I want to just repeat what you just said. I think this fear of missing out is there, whether it is a job where you are in the cubicle and you're like, they're going to call the other guy, they're going to call the other person. If I don't answer the phone, if I don't get back to them right now, they're going to find someone else. But it's also there in any side hustles that you're doing, right? Like, and I used to be much more active as a Beachbody coach. And I remember sitting and, hearing all those things of, we all have the same 168 hours in a week. I mean, I heard that so many times, and which, first of all, no, we don't. Like, if I had a personal assistant, I'd have a lot, because like half the stuff on my list, somebody else could do very easly, if not 80% of it. And way quicker than I do, because I get distracted. But also like, if you were just willing to not watch Netflix, like that was always this thing that was like repeated. Like if you just watch less TV and you put that time into work, then you would be able to achieve X, Y, or Z. And I was always like, I love television. Now, there's plenty of articles written about how like passing out on the couch to the television is not the kind of rest that's true rest.
Right.
But I love watching TV, and it is rest, and I delight in it. And so I am holding strong to my streaming channels. But I think that that fear of missing out is everywhere. Right. Yeah. And it's at all, if I don't do this, what are people going to think? Or they won't ask me to that. I know for me, a big driver is like, especially with volunteering, that if I say no to something, they won't ask me again.
Yeah. I was just going to mention volunteering, because I feel like as a serial volunteerer, is that a thing?
It is. I am one.
Right. That happens to me as well. Right. And it's not just if I don't say yes to volunteering, it's if I don't say yes to being the leader of the volunteers or the person who does the most in the volunteers. Right. And now that's also a function of my personality and my need to be in charge and all of those things. But like it goes to this point of, if you are deriving some degree of your personal value from feeling like they need you so much, then, or that they want you so much, or that they need you there, or whatever, then you're going to keep seeking that cookie, right? Like you're going to keep seeking that pat on the head, or whatever you want to call it. And because it feeds that need inside you, the unfortunate reality is that it's a false feeding. I mean, I'm making up bad analogies here, but it's a falsehood, right? Because it doesn't last, because it's not coming in from you internally. And so if we're not feeding ourselves, if we're not helping ourselves feel valuable, if we're not helping ourselves feel worthwhile, then it's not a lasting feeling. And so we keep seeking it out, and it becomes a cycle. We keep going back to the source that we think is going to fill that need and asking for more. And then at the end of the day, it leads to burnout. Now I know you said it before, and we really do need to take a quick break. So I'm going to do that. And when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about why everyone is working so hard, like what happened. So we'll be right back after this quick break.
Know what I really love to do?
Take baths, go for walks, read, drink margaritas, hike.
Yeah, not what I was referring to. We're recording a commercial right now.
I do, but I'm thinking outside the box, being adaptable.
As I was saying, what I love to do is host our live monthly workshops.
Oh, right. That's what we were talking about. Me too. They are a lot of fun to put together and host every month. And we can bring margaritas, so...
Join us for live conversation as we get a bit deeper into topics near and dear to our hearts. We go through everything from self-care to setting boundaries.
We share coaching tips, practical advice, and take questions from the audience. It's a whole lot of fun.
Sign up for our newsletter today at goboldlyinitiative.com/contact to make sure you hear about all the upcoming Go Boldly workshops.
You definitely don't want to miss out. Now, back to that show. Okay, so welcome back, everyone. Before the break, we were talking about why are we working so hard? Like, what's the point? And I think, Tovah, you said in the beginning, like, we're not opposed to hard work. Obviously, both of us work really hard. We have multiple jobs and parenting, which is a job in and of itself. It's like 12 jobs, frankly, and households and lives. And, we're working.
And we do like to volunteer. We are big volunteerers.
Yep. And so there is nothing wrong with hard work. There is something sort of devastating to your inner world about busyness for the sake of busyness. And that's where we're getting. So, part of the issue, and then I'll turn it over to you, Tovah, because I know you have something to say, but part of the issue is that workplaces create this culture of demand, and they demand all your time and all your attention and all your ability. And this mentality that if you are not constantly available, and if you are not always ready to say yes to work and ignore, your personal life, then you're not a good worker. And that cultural concept is completely irrational and unhealthy. There is no human that should spend their lives thinking the only valuable thing I do in a day is work, right? Like, that just doesn't make sense. And we're not biologically created or wired to work all day long. That's not our function as we're animals. That's not our function as animals, and then it's not our function as spiritual beings either. It doesn't soothe the soul in any way. And so that's but that compulsion from employers to work that hard all the time comes from profit lines, right? Like, that's how they make money. And they don't care if you burn out, because there's more of you waiting. There's just more people to work harder. And now I'm generalizing. Obviously, there are some great employers that do really care and do wonderful things, but like the cultural creation of this is from the larger scope. So
yeah, I mean, this certainly isn't an idea that an employee came up with on their own. Right. But I think a few things are important to note. One big thing is that the more you work does not mean you are more productive.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that will not shock most of you who work, because you're going to be like, I know, I sit there and it's a waste of time and blah, 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 and whatever. But it's something that seems obvious and also is very easy to forget when we get caught up in that hustle and that working. But the more you work, the busier you are at work does not translate to being more productive. It is not the same. And as I work for a company that has taken significant steps over the last couple of years to make it part of the company's values rather, to change that culture. Now, listen, I'm in sales for the most part, so it's very hard to change the culture of sales, because you have to work hard to sell things. That is inherent in, and also sales is often a numbers game. And so you have to reach out to more people to sell things, because it's a percentage numbers game. And yet there's still ways in that world to encourage people to take rest and take breaks And, things like, we expect you to use your vacation days. We expect you to take time off. We expect you to, when you are done at the end of the day, we expect you to be done at the end of the day. Because I think what companies have realized, some have at least, is that yes, people are replaceable. We are all replaceable. And there is someone behind me. If I quit my job today, which I don't plan on doing, in case anyone is listening from the company, I like my job, but there is someone right behind me that could replace me. And I would like to pretend that it wouldn't be an easy replacement, and that there's things that I bring to the job that are special and unique. And obviously we are all special and unique, but I am totally 100% replaceable for that job. There are jobs that I have that I am not replaceable for. Being a parent, that is a job that I am not replaceable for. I'd like to think that the job Rielly and I have together and the company we have together, I am not replaceable. I mean, theoretically, someone else could come and do this, but it would not be the same, because this is
Right.
like the Rielly Tovah show, right?
Right.
So, but for my other job, I am 100% replaceable. That is okay, right? And I think that is something that is really, really important, because as we go to the conversation about self-worth, if I was only deriving my self-worth from my job, my 9 to 5, it's not 9 to 5, but my 9 to 5 job, I really do though try to make it 9 to 5. That is the difference between Tovah today and Tovah 8 years ago, is
Right.
that I really work for that job to be 9 to 5. But if I had all my self-worth tied up in my job, then it would be devastating to hear that I am replaceable. And it would be confusing, devastating, confusing. It would undercut my own personal self-worth. I would not know where to derive my worthiness from. It's why we've had these conversations when your identity is tied up in your job,
Yes.
right? That you lose your job and then you are lost, right? We had this conversation a couple seasons ago. So it is freeing to know that I am replaceable, because it makes me find my value and my worth in other things. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't work super hard, because I like to work hard and I like to do well at my job and I like to succeed. But success for me is not the number of hours that I put in. And I think that is important. And it takes a shift, right? It takes a shift of, I think there was a study that one of us stumbled over. We kind of both researched this one, so now I don't even know what I read and what you read, but that said that 68% of employees feel that they don't have enough hours in the day to complete their tasks. And what I have learned is I am not going to get through my to-do list. Really, the only time that I am like a non-negotiable with my to-do list is like for the week before a vacation.
Yeah.
And then I then have to talk to Rielly about how I fell back into old patterns of hustle culture and make sure that it doesn't happen after the vacation.
Yeah. But that's different. I get that. I do the same thing.
That's a one-off, right?
Right.
And so, but I realized that my to-do list can actually carry over the next day. And it is not like a failure on my part for that to happen. And so it's also how I approach my personal life to-do list. I have like a month. I keep a to-do list for each month, and then I just pull things out to do each day. But it's okay if I don't get there. It's okay if they carry over, and that is not a failing on my part. And now listen, 8 years ago, I always had things on my to-do list at the end of the day, except that I felt like a failure for having things on my to-do list at the end of the day. Or if I didn't, I was staying up too late and I was working after the kids went to bed and I was doing all of these things. Now, same things are left on the to-do list, but I'm okay knowing I can do them the next day. It's a huge mental piece to this.
It is. And I think it either goes that way or it goes, much in the direction that I went when I was so immersed in hustle culture that all I did was work. Right. And then there was nothing on my plate that was fun. Like literally no hobbies, no enjoyment, no time with my friends. Barely saw my now husband then. I don't know, I guess we boyfriend, whatever he was. And we lived together and I barely saw him. And all I did was work. And I thought for sure that that was the way to success, right? Like I thought, okay, if I just keep doing this thing that I'm actually not enjoying doing at all. Well, I mean, there were parts of it that I enjoyed, but for the most part, I wasn't like ecstatic about it. It wasn't fueling my passion. Let's put it that way. I was learning and I was gaining skills and there were things about it that were good. And there were people that I liked that I was working with, but there were parts of it that were just like mind numbing and awful. But I was doing it. I was on call 24 hours a day for things that were not heart surgery. And so, which that's by the end of what I was doing, that's what I was like telling myself, right? I'm like, no one's going to die if I don't do this.
Right.
Right. And like the world will not end if I don't finish this document. Like nothing bad's going to happen to anyone. And that was sort of my litmus test of like, what's happening for me right now. And so there was no hustle in the sense of I wasn't trying to do too many things. I was doing the work to the exclusion of my joy. And
Right.
I think that is something that that people do. I think that people find themselves in that sort of grind mentality. And that's like the grind side of hustle culture, right? I was grinding because I was rising up through the ranks of what I was doing and, thinking, okay, well, this is the track I'm on and this is where I want to get to. And these are my goals and so on and so forth. And hitting marks and all those things. And, but at the end of the day, I completely lost track of who I was. I had no idea who I was on the inside. I was just purely like autopilot behavior. I just got up in the morning, I worked, I had some breakfast, I took a shower, I went to work, I worked more. Like I literally got out of bed and started working on my coffee table and then would eat maybe. And then I would go to work and work more. And then I would work. And then I would work all night. That's all I did. And so, once you get into that sort of cycle, it becomes, it's almost like you put blinders on and you can't see anything else. And you think, okay, well now this is what I've done. And so this is my identity. This is my value. This is who I am. And so if I don't have this, then I have literally nothing. I have nothing else. And I am no one. And I am of no value to anyone. And that is so overwhelming. And so when you kind of get to that place, it becomes very hard to figure out, okay, well, now what do I do? I mean, I'm not happy doing this, but I don't want to be nothing. And then it's just a blank pause of like, okay, well, where do I go? And I think that's what hustle culture does to people who are in that kind of grind of like, well, I'm just going to stay in it because if I don't stay in it, then I have nowhere to go. I have nothing to be.
Well, and if you are benefiting financially from it as well, there's also those golden handcuffs, right?
Yes.
Where you are, I had a good friend after law school who, I think we all had a good friend after law school who did this, who got a job at a big firm in the city. And they paid an exorbitant amount of money for an apartment that they never were in because it was 2 blocks away from the office.
Yeah.
And so their only chance of ever being in any apartment was to have an apartment 2 blocks away. But it meant that they paid, an insane amount of money for it. And they still weren't in it that much. And then they had to figure out, how do they get out? And, a lot of people will take positions thinking, I'm doing this temporarily. I'm doing this to pay off loans, or I'm doing this because this is just what you do for now. And then at some point I will be, free from this as you move up the ranks. And I think one of the problems is that might have been true in the past, that as you moved up the ranks at your position or your job or your company, you did get more freedom and you could hand it off to the associates or the younger members of your team, whomever they are. And now that's just not true. You see 75-year-old people hustling and you're like, what now?
Yeah. Yes.
Wait a minute. And there are the reason, just in case you're wondering, if you haven't figured it out yet, that we're saying we need to figure out why we're doing this as individuals is because the physical side effects of this can be deadly. Like that's not that's not a exaggeration.
Right.
You can end up in the hospital.
Well, the physical and the mental side
And the
effects
mental.
can be deadly.
Yes.
We need to take one more quick break, but let's do that. And then we come back. Tova, why don't you kind of start running through that? So we'll be right back after this quick break. In case you didn't already know, we love talking.
True story. More than simply talking, we love researching, prepping, and bringing this podcast to life.
We launched We Go Boldly with the goal of reaching people dealing with the kinds of questions and concerns that we also face.
Things like how to hear my inner voice, how to make sure my habits are worth it and stick. How do I feel my feelings and still manage to function?
After years of personal work and lots of trial and error, we realized we have a lot to share on these topics.
Now we've been broadcasting for over a year, and we are proud of our podcast.
And to no one's surprise, we still have a lot to say and talk about.
We sure do. We need your help to keep going. Every episode takes time and money to create, and we would love your support.
So, if you like what we are doing, please support us by joining our Patreon community and becoming a monthly subscriber.
Join our Patreon community today at patreon.com/wegoboldly. We are so grateful to all of our supporters. Now, back to the show. Okay, so welcome back. And yeah, I get the fun part of talking about all of the really severely negative things that can happen. And physically, right? So we're talking what chronic stress can do to a body. There's no limitation to the negative impacts it can have on your body, but including, cardiovascular disease. There's a reason that it is like a Hollywood trope that the workaholic has a heart attack, because workaholics have heart attacks.
Right. Yeah. It's not like made up. It's actually happening.
But then there's also the other side effects, the mental side effects that are harder to see. And as, if not more important, the depression, the anxiety. And this goes to that grind that you were talking about, Rielly, of going and going and going and being afraid of what will happen if you stop, and not taking that time to find the joy and not making sure that what you're doing is for a purpose for you. And it is okay if the purpose of you working hard is to pay off loans. That's okay. We understand that.
We understand.
But you need something more, right? So it's one thing if the reason you're working so hard is to pay off your loans. Cool. Got it. We understand. That can't be where your self-worth comes from.
Right.
Because it's really confusing. So you're working this job and that's where you're trying to find your self-worth, but you're really only doing it as a means to an end. And the end isn't like world peace. The end's to pay off your loans, which is personally just as important, of course. But it's still about making sure that you are finding your value internally and somewhere else other than your job, because that will be what will help, in addition to therapy, maybe medication, that will help your depression and anxiety. But finding, which we obviously think therapy is just the bee's knees, as we always say. So
every time.
But But one piece of that, something that you will eventually will get to in therapy, is to talk about, where are you deriving your self-worth? Where is it coming from? And also, if there's not a clear reason, right? So we outlined, okay, you're working really hard to pay off your loans. All right, that was true for 4 years or 5 years, 10 years. Now it's 20 years and you're still working this job. Are you working it because you like it? Are you working it because you are stuck there financially because you can't find your way out of it? Are you working because you are hiding from something else? Is it a distraction, right? Is the busyness a distraction? Is the work hiding from your life that is unhappy? Because I can tell you that work is an excellent way to hide from an unhappy life, except that it doesn't actually fix the unhappy life. It's just it's good at the hiding part, no other part.
And just to tweak that a little bit, it may not even be an unhappy life per se, but it may be some degree of internal unhappiness.
Yeah.
Which is ultimately an unhappy life, but people don't see it the same way necessarily, right? Like everything in your life might be fine. You might be in a great relationship or be happy being by yourself. You might have great kids or not. Whatever your outward circumstances are, you might look at them and go, everything looks the way that I want it to look. You may not be happy on the inside. And that is something that you might be distracting yourself from by working so much that you don't have to think about it. Ask me how I know. Yeah. So it's, it is possible that there are all these underlying reasons that you have gotten yourself, if you have, caught up in the trappings of this culture of busyness and the workaholic behavior. And again, it may be that you feel like this is the only way you can rise through the ranks in your company that you're at. But if that's the case, maybe you need to reevaluate where you're working. If you can, I understand. And, we understand all the nuance of this. We're not blind to the reality of needing a job, needing to pay bills and all those things. But
Yeah.
We're asking you to look deeper at what's actually happening internally in yourself while you're making these choices, because they are choices at the end of the day.
Well, and also, I've had friends that have worked at the same place and had completely different experiences because one knew how to set boundaries and one did not.
Yep.
Right.
So you just went to the very next topic that I think we're on the same page today. It's exciting.
This is awesome. Because I don't want to say it's all in your head, but sometimes you think that you have to do things a certain way, right? You think that, and you think it because the world has told you this, or at least the world in this country has told you this. So this isn't you making stuff up on your own. Let's be very clear. This is because you log on to Instagram, and if you're following the wrong people, and I say that because everyone on my Instagram tells me to take a rest. Like everyone on my Instagram tells me to avoid burnout culture.
Right.
Remember that busyness and productivity isn't the same, and it's telling me to take a rest and set a boundary. So curate your Instagram to tell you what you want it to hear, because I'm sure I could find the people that would tell me to rise and grind, and that would tell me that, put down the Netflix. And I want to say, I have thoughts for you about that because it's awesome. And, like there are other ways to do it. Now, listen, we recognize you might have a horrible boss. And so we're not pretending that, you might live somewhere there's not a lot of opportunity. But I got to tell you, now is the time. Culturally, now is the time to look for another job. Like, it is a employees market. There are so many jobs that can be done remotely. So even if you are somewhere that doesn't have a lot of opportunity, you're not necessarily limited geographically and you don't have to move. So now is the time to demand more of yourself and more of your work experience. But I will, since you are the boundary setting rock star, I will turn it over to you, because I do think that this is important, that two people can work at the same company and have two totally different experiences because one knows how to set a boundary.
Yeah, it's super, super important that you figure out what matters to you and start telling people, right? So it seems so simple. It's not. Tovah's cackling. When you are working whether it's you're working for somebody, for yourself, whether you're volunteering, you have to learn how to tell people what you need. And in order to tell people what you need to know what you need. And that's, I think, sometimes the hardest step, right? Is to figure out, hey, I need to be at my kids' baseball game every Thursday night because it's really important time for both of us. And I'm not going to answer my emails at that time or pick up phone calls, and I'm not scheduling meetings. So don't ask me to do it. And you need to make it clear that that's the case. I need to work out before I go to work. So figure something out with your partner, or figure out, get a dog walker if you can, if you need something like that, or incorporate your dog into your workout. Whatever the things are that you need to be doing in order to get the time for yourself that makes you feel more content, that makes you feel like you have some degree of, I want to say control, but it's not control, some degree of say in what is happening on your day to day that doesn't revolve around every aspect of work is where you want to start going. But you have to understand what those things are first. Like for me, I fell off my meditation wagon for a while, and it was bad. Like that was a bad move for me. It didn't work out very well. And I realized it. Tova and I talked about it, and we were like, oh, this isn't working. So I got back on the wagon. And I said to my husband, I said, I have to be able to meditate every morning. And I said it to my kids, and they're 5 and 9. And they were like, okay. I said, listen, mommy's a better mommy when I meditate for 15 minutes in the morning. Can you give me those 15 minutes? Now, do they do it every time? No, but most of the time they'll give me those 15 minutes without interruption, because they know that I am happier and they are happier when I get that time. That was a boundary I set. That's a boundary. It may not sound like a boundary, but that's what it is. And you can do that in your own, in your own day-to-day life. You can do that in your job. Your boss may push back, and that's okay if they push back and they're like, you know what? I actually can't let you take an hour and a half for lunch, but I can let you take 45 minutes and then another half an hour in the afternoon. Right? Like right. We can all negotiate these things.
Well, also let's remind ourselves over and over and over and over that hard work does not always equal success, and busyness does not always equal productivity. Right. So there could be some adjustment periods, and you're going to have to figure out, because you might not shoot if you're getting 10 minutes for lunch. You don't shoot for the hour and a half lunch just yet.
Right.
But
right.
you prove that you can be just as productive, right? And with less time. And I think that is something that is really important for all of us to know, which is, and I think I've shared it here, I've certainly shared it to other people, but this was back in, I don't know, November or sometime, and I was picking my kids up from aftercare, and my manager called me at 5:15. And she apologized for calling so late. And in my head, I was picking up my kids and I was going back to do more work. And I was like, what now? I'm thinking, it's not late, it's 5:15. But now it's like, all right, if that's what she thinks, I am really trying to draw a line at 5 o'clock. And what that line looks like is, and it's a work in progress, but I turn my phone on black and white So I'm not quick to like always look at it, because phones are just way less fun when they're black and white than when they're in color. Side effect. I also have tried to do not a 15-minute meditation, but like a 1-minute breathing exercise, because I work from home. So I want to be able to like delineate the time between, okay, now I'm at home, and now I'm work home. I'm not always successful. There have been times, I mean, recently, I think I said to Rielly, I was so upset that my kids were playing on their devices, and it was like, why are you playing on your devices all night? And I realized like I was still sitting in front of my computer at like 6:45 doing work. And it was like, oh yeah, because no one's engaging with you. That makes sense. But I think that, you can figure out, and what I have learned is I can get everything I need to get done. It was when I was thinking, well, I'm going to have to work for a couple hours after the kids go to bed, that I was like taking my time during the day to like, because honestly, I do love those times when like the kids are asleep and no one's responding to any emails and I can actually work. But it means that I'm working at night and then I'm not sleeping, and none of that's good. So this has forced me to actually do my work during the day and be willing to let go of the to-do list and recognize that I do not have a job where I'm saving lives, and, all of those things. So it is setting boundaries for yourself first, oftentimes before you even set the boundaries for other people.
Yeah, that's such an important distinction too. That boundaries, and we've talked about this at length, but it bears repeating. Boundaries are about you, not about anyone else. And so if you come at boundaries from the perspective that they are for your own benefit, it is much easier to set them. They are not about punishing somebody. They are about making your life and everyone else's life that comes into contact with yours better. And it makes it a lot easier to stomach the idea of saying no or saying yes, depending. But setting those boundaries so that you have the space, and that whether it's physical or energetic, to do the things that you actually want to be doing and need to be doing, so that you have the energy to do other things. But some other important reminders of sort of how you can reject hustle culture, how you can get away from this idea of hustle culture, is to be very intentional about your productivity. So, it's such a overused term, right? This being intentional about things, but it's overused for a good reason, right? The more intentional we are about our lives, the more intentional we are about the way we go through our days, as opposed to what I was describing in my own life earlier, of this sort of autopilot, like daily grind. The more actual presence we have in what we're doing every single day, and the more we're in tune we become with our reasons for what we're doing. And it's easier once you start to notice, like, why am I rushing to get this thing done that's due in 3 weeks, and ignoring the other things on my desk that are due tomorrow, right? Like, why am I doing things the way that I'm doing? Is it for a pat on the head, or is it because this is what I need to be doing? So starting to be intentional about the why and look for the motivation behind what we're doing, I think is one way to just even start noticing this hustle culture all around us, because sometimes we're blind to it. And that's because it's so ingrained and so much a part of the last, I would say, 20, 30 years of culture here.
Well, and I think that that leads right into our homework so nicely.
Yes.
Yes. Because there's no surprise that with our homework, we want you to start noticing and paying attention to how often you see hustle culture show up in your day for the next week. And make a note whether it's showing up in your own mind, like you're the one doing it, or is it in your workplace? Is it in your friendships? Is it that feeling that like, I can't say no to this volunteer opportunity, or I'm somehow disappointing somebody, or, is that what it is? And where does it show up in your social media? And this was not in our official homework, but I'm going to add it. ditch those accounts, man.
Yes.
Like
Block, unlike, unfollow.
Unlike, unfollow. Like I'm telling you, there is a safe place on social media that is filled with rest and joy and boundary setting. Find that place. And maybe this week we'll try to share some of our favorite follows.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Because we do have them. And because I do not have hustle culture on my social media anymore.
No.
I have ditched them all.
Yeah. And this homework goes along with the homework from our first episode of the season of just starting to build that personal awareness of how is busyness infiltrating your life? Where is it?
I just like the word infiltrated. I like that.
I know, right? Can you start to get a handle on like where it is in your life and what, how are you going to address it? Are you going to address it? Like, let's start to build a package for you so that you can be more intentional. My favorite word about, how you're doing things every day and be more present in your own life.
Yes, that sounds great. And with that, I think we'll let you go and we will see you next week to have another conversation about busyness and worthiness and all that good stuff.
All the fun stuff.
Thanks so much for listening to We Go Boldly podcast. We know you're busy and we love spending time with you.
If you enjoyed this week's episode, let us know. Head to Apple Podcasts right now to rate and review our show. While you're there, be sure to click that subscribe button.
Want more us time? Follow us on all the socials at Go Boldly Together.
Want even more us time? As in all the coaching pizzazz. Find us at goboldlyinitiative.com for all the info.
We will be back with more excitement, research, and deep thoughts next week.
Until then, keep on being the bold, brave, amazing people we know you already are.